Far from Earth, in a small human research station near Saturn, a man named Thomas worked alone in the signal monitoring room. He had been living on the station for 8 months. It was quiet, cold, and sometimes lonely. Most of the time, his job was simple: listen to signals from deep space and report anything unusual. But for many months, nothing special ever came. Then one evening, everything changed. Thomas was drinking warm tea and watching the stars through the small window beside his desk. He always liked that view. Suddenly, his computer screen blinked. A signal had come through, strange and soft. It wasn't loud or fast like normal data. It was musical, almost like a heartbeat mixed with a whisper. Thomas leaned closer. The signal repeated again and again, not too strong, but not random either. He called the science officer, a woman named Lena, and asked her to check the signal. She listened for a few minutes, then shrugged. Probably interference. Space dust or something bouncing off the rings of Saturn. But it's repeating, Thomas said. Same rhythm, every 12 seconds. Even so, it's not important, she replied. Keep recording, but don't worry about it. But Thomas did worry. Something about the signal felt alive. Later that night, after everyone went to sleep, Thomas stayed in the control room. He connected his headphones and listened again. The sound was clearer now. Soft pulses like breathing. Then, slowly, very faintly, he heard something new. A word. Not in English. Not in any human language he knew. But somehow he understood it. Help. He sat back in his chair, confused. How could he understand something that wasn't even in his language? Was it just his imagination? The next day, the signal continued. Nobody else seemed to care. They were busy with station repairs and sending reports to Earth. Thomas, however, was focused on the signal. He began recording every second of it. He even created a small translator program to catch any repeating patterns. By the end of the week, he had heard 3 clear words: alone, cold, help. One night, as he listened again, the signal stopped. Just like that, gone. Thomas felt a strange emptiness, like someone had called out to him. And he didn't answer in time. 3 days later, an alert came from the station's radar system. Unidentified object detected near Enceladus, the system said. Enceladus was one of Saturn's icy moons. The object was moving slowly, and then suddenly stopped under the ice near its south pole. The crew sent a drone to check, but a strong snowstorm on the surface made it impossible to land safely. Most of the team decided to wait, but Thomas didn't want to wait. That night, without telling anyone, he took one of the older snow rovers and drove out towards the signal's last known point. The journey took 6 hours. Ice winds hit the rover, and visibility was low, but Thomas kept going. Finally, he reached the location. His scanner beeped. Something metallic was buried under the ice. He started digging carefully using the rover's arm. After 2 hours, he found something that looked like a small pod. Round, silver, and glowing faintly. Thomas cleared the ice and found a hatch on the side. When he touched it, the pod hissed and the hatch slowly opened. Inside, he saw her. She was lying in a curled position, her skin a pale, glowing blue. She looked almost human, but not quite. Her hair was thin like silk, floating gently as if in water. Her eyes were closed, but she was breathing, and she was trembling. Thomas stared, unsure what to do. She didn't look hurt. She didn't open her eyes, but her body shivered softly. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently. She didn't respond, but her fingers moved slightly. Then her eyes opened large, soft, and filled with light. She looked at Thomas, blinking slowly. Thomas felt something strange in his chest. He thought she would be afraid. He was a stranger, an alien to her. But she didn't pull away. Her eyes held no fear, only confusion, cold, and maybe hope. He took off his gloves and gently reached out. She didn't move, but her eyes followed his hand. Slowly, very slowly, she placed her hand on his dot. Her fingers were thin and cool, and they trembled under his touch. She was scared, yes, but not of him. Thomas helped her out of the pod. She was weak, but able to stand. He wrapped her in a thermal blanket and brought her into the rover. As they drove back toward the station, he kept looking at her. She didn't speak, but watched everything around her. Sometimes she looked at him, her head tilting slightly, as if trying to understand who or what he was. The stars above them shone brightly. The ice under their vehicle cracked and groaned. But inside the rover, it was quiet. Thomas felt something new. This wasn't just a discovery. This was the beginning of something. Something human, something more. The snow rover moved slowly across the icy surface of Enceladus. Inside, Thomas kept glancing at the strange girl sitting beside him. She was wrapped in a warm silver blanket, and her glowing eyes looked out the window silently. Her skin still shimmered with a soft blue light. She didn't speak, but her presence filled the cabin with quiet energy. Thomas wanted to ask many questions. Who was she? Where did she come from? What happened to her ship? But he stayed quiet. He didn't want to scare her. She already looked tired, and he could still see the slight shaking in her hands. After 4 hours, they reached the research station. Thomas stopped the rover and looked at her. "We're here," he said gently. She looked at the building ahead. Lights glowed in the windows. Small machines moved slowly outside, measuring the air and temperature. It was quiet, like the station was sleeping. Thomas opened the rover door. Cold air rushed in. The girl pulled the blanket tighter around herself. He helped her down carefully. She walked slowly, her bare feet touching the icy ground for only a few seconds before he lifted her up again and carried her inside. He took her through a back hallway that led to the lower storage rooms. Few people ever went there, and it was the only place where he could keep her safe for now. He found an old lab room, quiet and warm. He placed her gently on a soft chair and turned on the small heater in the corner. The girl looked around the room. She didn't look afraid, just curious. Her glowing eyes followed every small light and every quiet sound. "I'll bring you water," Thomas said. He left for a few minutes and returned with a warm cup. She took it carefully and sipped slowly. Her hands were still shaking, but not as much as before. She looked at him, then pointed at the wall and made a soft sound, not a word, but a note. A tone. Thomas listened carefully. She pointed again, this time drawing a shape in the air, a circle, then a smaller shape inside it. Then she made the same sound again. Was she trying to tell him something? Thomas picked up a small tablet and drew a picture of the escape pod. She nodded. Then he drew a question mark. She took the pen and slowly drew her own picture. It was rough but clear, a starship, larger than the pod, broken in 2 pieces. Then she drew lines around it, like waves or clouds. She paused and looked at Thomas, as if checking if he understood. He stared at the drawing. Was she showing him what happened to her ship? Then, slowly, she drew herself inside a circle, maybe the pod, and a line showing her falling toward Encelad. US. She tapped the word Thomas had written earlier. Help. She had crashed here. Thomas felt a chill. She wasn't just lost, she had survived something big, something dangerous. And she had sent a signal not to threaten Earth, but to ask for help. The next day, Thomas brought her a few human clothes. They were too big for her, but she smiled softly when she wore the soft sweater. Her skin still glowed faintly, but it seemed a little warmer now. He brought books with pictures of Earth, animals, mountains, oceans. She stared at the photos of forests for a long time. Then she pointed at a tree and touched her own chest gently. "Like trees?" Thomas asked, smiling. She nodded, then closed her eyes. A small glow appeared on her forehead, and for a few seconds, Thomas saw an image, not from a book, but from her mind. Tall crystal trees, floating lights. A sky with two suns, then it vanished. Thomas stepped back, amazed. "Did you just show me that?" She didn't answer, but her eyes looked hopeful, like she wanted him to understand. Somehow they were starting to share thoughts. Not with words, but with feelings and pictures. That evening, Thomas wrote a private note in his journal. "She is not dangerous. She is scared, gentle, and lost. I don't think she came to hurt anyone. I think she came to find someone to understand, and now she's stuck here. I need to protect her. If the others find her, they might not understand." Over the next few days, Thomas and the girl, whom he started calling Lena, grew closer in silence. She began to copy small things he did, sipping tea, nodding, pointing to objects and waiting for him to say their names. She learned fast. One morning, she surprised him by pointing at herself and saying softly, "Lena." Thomas smiled wide. "Yes, Lena, that's you." Then she pointed at him. "Toma?" He laughed. "Close, Thomas." "Tom, as," she repeated, slower. That moment felt big. Two lives from different worlds, learning to speak to each other, not through power, but through patience and care. But peace didn't last. Later that day, the main science officer, Lena, came into the hallway near the lower labs. Thomas heard her voice and quickly turned off the heater light in Lena's room. He whispered, "Stay quiet," and closed the door. "Gently, Thomas," Lena called. "Why are you down here?" "Just checking old equipment," he replied. "Well, report back soon. We may have to send another drone to Enceladus." Something strange was picked up under the ice. Could be tech wreckage. Thomas nodded, hiding the worry on his face. "Okay. I'll be there soon." When Lena left, he returned to Lena. She was standing now, looking at him, worried. Thomas sighed. "We don't have much time. If they find you." She walked to the wall and drew again. This time, she drew shapes around her ship clouds with dark centers, sharp waves. She pointed at them, then at herself, and trembled. Not fear of humans. Fear of what brought her down. Something was still out there, and it might come again. In the quiet corners of the station, Thomas and Lena continued to grow closer. Every day, they spent hours in the old lab, learning from each other without speaking much. Lena had started using simple words like cold, light, and tree. Thomas had started drawing pictures to explain new ideas. It wasn't fast, but it was real. Lena smiled more now. She no longer trembled like before. Her skin still gave off a soft glow, but it was warmer. Her steps were more steady. She had even touched the plants in Thomas's small lab garden, watching them with deep wonder. One day, Thomas brought her something different: music. He placed a small speaker on the table and played a soft piano melody. Lena froze at first, then closed her eyes and tilted her head slowly, as if listening with her whole body. After a minute, she opened her eyes and touched her chest. "Warm," she said, softly. Thomas smiled. "That's called music." "Music," she repeated. She picked up a pen and drew lines in the air, following the rise and fall of the notes. It looked like she was drawing the shape of the sound. Then she added glowing dots between the lines and pointed at Thomas, then at herself. It took him a moment, but he understood she was saying music connected them. "It does," Thomas said, "even without words." That same evening, Thomas showed her more of Earth. He brought a screen and played short videos of rain, birds, children laughing, forests in the wind, and the ocean waves hitting rocks. Lena watched everything with silent amazement. She touched the image of rain. "What?" she asked. "Rain," he answered. She whispered the word again and again. "Rain." Then she looked at the picture of the ocean. "Big water?" she asked. "Yes," Thomas laughed. "That's the sea. It covers most of Earth." Lena stared at it for a long time. Then she drew a picture on the screen. 2 circles, one large, one small. She pointed at the small one and drew stars around it. Then she pointed at the big one and drew tiny figures holding hands. Thomas realized what she meant. "You're saying your world is small and Earth is big." She nodded. Then she pointed at herself and made a swirl with her hand, like something falling. She repeated the word she had spoken before. "Help." Thomas leaned forward. "Was your ship falling, crashing?" She nodded slowly. Then she drew a strange shape like a cloud with spikes around it. She circled it with black and tapped it twice. Thomas frowned. "What is that?" Lena looked at him seriously. She held her hand near her head, then moved it across the air slowly. Her fingers left a faint light behind. It looked like she was showing something floating or spreading. Then she showed the picture of her broken ship again, trapped inside. That cloud shape. Thomas looked closely. "Did that thing cause your ship to crash?" Lena nodded again. The next day, Thomas went to the station's archive room. He searched the records of all past missions near Enceladus. After a few hours, he found something strange, a forgotten drone mission from 12 years ago. The drone disappeared while scanning deep ice. The final report showed weak signals similar to the ones Lena had sent before. Nobody had looked into it further. Thomas compared the map from the old report with Lena's drawings. The location was almost the same. He rushed back to Lena's room and showed her the old signal print. She stared at it, then nodded quickly. She pointed at the signal, then at the cloud drawing. "That's where it started, right?" Thomas asked. She pointed again and then drew many small circles near it. "Ships? People?" Then she slowly erased each one. Thomas felt a cold chill. "They're gone?" She nodded again. That night, Thomas wrote in his journal. She wasn't the only one. Others came with her. A crew, maybe even a whole team, but only she survived. Something is under the ice of Enceladus. Something that pulls ships in. She didn't come to hurt us. She came to warn us. Over the next few days, Lena began drawing more often. She used light from her fingers to create soft images in the air, her city, her people, floating buildings made of glass and stone. She showed a sky with 2 moons and plants that danced with color. She even showed a picture of herself laughing with others like her. Her light grew brighter when she drew happy things. Thomas understood then she missed her home. One day, she looked at him and said slowly, "Home, far." "Yes," Thomas replied gently. "But maybe we can help." She looked hopeful. She touched his chest with her glowing hand and said softly, "Kind." Thomas was surprised. "You think I'm kind?" She nodded. Then she pointed at the drawing of Earth's people holding hands. Thomas whispered, "That's what we try to be, kind, together." One evening, as they sat near the heater, Lena surprised him again. She brought out a small glowing crystal from the sleeve of her clothes. She placed it on the table, and it began to float. Then it opened, like petals unfolding. A soft light filled the room, and a moving image appeared, a message. It showed other beings like Lena standing around a glowing star map. They spoke in soft tones. Their faces looked worried. Then the image shifted to show Earth from space. Thomas leaned forward. The final scene was simple. One of Lena's people drawing a line from their world to Earth and placing a symbol for hope between the two. The message was clear. They had been watching Earth, not to harm it, but to ask for help, to reach out, and Lena was the one sent to begin that contact. Thomas sat in silence for a while. Then he said, "You weren't just calling for help. You were trying to find us." Lena smiled, and for the first time since she arrived, her body stopped trembling. The next morning, Thomas woke up early. His mind was full of thoughts. Lena's message, her people, showing Earth as a place of hope, played over and over in his head. He had never imagined that someone from another world could think so kindly about humans. He had always believed that, in the big universe, humans were still learning how to be better. Now, someone had noticed their kindness and had come looking for it. But not everyone would understand this. Not everyone would listen. Thomas quietly walked through the empty halls of the research station. Most people were still asleep. He reached the small room where Lena was resting. She was sitting on the floor, drawing again with light from her fingers. This time, she was showing what looked like energy waves, soft at first, but growing stronger and darker in color. Thomas watched silently. She noticed him and smiled. Then she pointed at the waves and tapped the table twice. It was her way of saying, "This is important." Thomas sat down beside her. "What is it?" She drew her ship again, falling into the dark waves. Then she showed those waves moving outwards, growing and spreading. Thomas's heart started to race. "It's getting bigger?" Lena nodded. Then she showed a new picture, Earth, and the waves, slowly moving toward it. Thomas stared at them. "The image, you think it will reach Earth?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Her face said everything. Later that day, Thomas went to the station's data room. He began looking for old reports about strange energy fields near Enceladus. Most were boring, just ice studies or temperature readings. But then, hidden in a corner of the archive, he found something different. It was a report from 15 years ago. A probe had entered one of Enceladus's deep ice cracks. The video feed stopped, but the energy reading stayed active for 3 hours. The numbers were strange, unusual energy waves that didn't match anything Earth scientists had seen before. The last line of the report said, "Unknown field, possibly organic in nature. Unclear if natural or created." Thomas printed the report and brought it back to Lena. She read it carefully. Then she looked at him with serious eyes and nodded. Thomas whispered, "It's alive, isn't it?" Lena didn't speak. She simply drew a single shape in the air, a dark circle with no light inside. Then she placed a small dot beside it, her ship. Then she drew the dark circle, swallowing it. It was clear now. Something under Enceladus wasn't just energy. It was living. Or at least reacting like it was. Maybe not like a human or animal, but something that could grow, spread, and trap. Thomas started writing notes in a small book. Lena's ship didn't crash by accident. Something pulled it in. The same thing took her crew. It hides under the ice, sending out signals, pulling in anything nearby. Maybe it's not trying to hurt. Maybe it's just reaching. But whatever it is, it's dangerous, and no one else knows. Over the next few days, Thomas and Lena spent more time in the lab. She showed him more about her world, how they lived in floating cities, how they didn't use metal or machines like humans. Their energy came from light, music, and the movement of air and water. They believed in balance, in sharing life with nature. Thomas was amazed. No machines, no engines. Lena smiled and drew a soft circle of light. She tapped it, and it started to spin. Inside, shapes moved like stars dancing. It was beautiful. "Everything moves," she said slowly. "We listen, not control." Thomas looked at her with wonder. "You came all this way, just to find us?" Lena looked down, thoughtful. Then she pointed at a drawing of her city. She placed a small mark over it, a crack. Then she pointed at herself, then Earth, and made the hope symbol again. Her people were in trouble. Their balance had broken. And they believed Earth had something they had lost. Not power. Heart. One evening, while Thomas was reviewing old signal files, he heard footsteps outside. Quickly, he hid Lena's drawings under the desk. The door opened. It was Lena, the science officer. She looked around the room. "You've been working late again," she said. Thomas nodded, trying to stay calm. "Just checking old reports." Lena walked over and picked up one of the printed energy logs. "Is this about that strange wave we picked up last week?" Thomas replied, "I think something's under the ice. Maybe a natural field, but it's strong." Lena gave him a look. "Be careful, Thomas. Don't go too deep into theories. You don't want to scare people without proof." He nodded. "I understand." She paused at the door. "And don't wander off again like last time. No more secret trips to the surface." Then she left. Thomas waited until she was gone. Then he looked at Lena's drawings again. He whispered, "I need to find out what's really under the ice." That night, he and Lena sat together, looking at the stars through a small window. She leaned against the glass, watching the bright lights in silence. Thomas said softly, "If we could send a message to your people, would they come for you?" Lena's face lit up. She nodded. Then she pointed at her chest, then at him, then drew a line between them like a bond. "You trust me?" he asked. She nodded again. Then she held up the small glowing crystal that carried her memory message. She placed it in his hand. Thomas closed his fingers around it. "We'll find a way to send this, I promise." Lena smiled, and in that quiet moment, with stars above and ice below, a human and an alien sat side by side, connected not by technology or power, but by understanding. The next morning, Thomas stood by the window of the lab, holding the small glowing crystal Lena had given him. It felt warm in his hand. He stared at it for a long time. It looked simple, like a smooth stone, but he knew it carried something powerful, a message from another world. Lena walked over and stood beside him. Her eyes were calm now. She no longer trembled like before. She had grown stronger, more open, and more human in her ways. Yet, she still moved like a song, light and full of meaning. Thomas turned to her. Can we use it to call your people?" Lena nodded. She took the crystal back and placed it on the table. Then she held her hands above it. The crystal floated and began to glow brighter. A soft hum filled the room. Then the air above the crystal changed, and once again, the hologram message appeared. This time, Thomas watched more carefully. Lena's people stood in a large room made of light and crystal. They spoke without sound, but the message was clear through the way they moved, the way their colors changed with emotion. They were worried. They showed pictures of stars dimming, planets growing dark. They circled one world, Lena's home, and showed cracks spreading across it. Then, they pointed at Earth. A gentle symbol appeared between the two planets. A swirl, glowing softly. Thomas remembered Lena's word for it, hope. The last image showed a ship being launched. Lena's ship. He looked at her. "They sent you to find help. Before it's too late." She nodded, her eyes soft. He asked slowly, "You think Earth can help save your world?" Lena pointed at his chest and said, "Kind." Then she pointed to her head and added, "Open." Thomas understood. Her people had lost something, the human spirit of kindness, connection, and the ability to feel with the heart, not just think with the mind. Later, Thomas went to the storage bay. He opened an old locker and pulled out a signal booster unit. It hadn't been used in years, but if he connected it to the station's satellite dish, it might be strong enough to send the message across deep space. Back in the lab, he and Lena worked together. She adjusted the crystal, aligning its light with the wires. She placed her hand gently on the signal unit, and it began to glow faintly. The machine, long silent, came alive again. Thomas smiled. "That's good. Now we just need to upload the message and send it." Lena looked nervous. She placed her hand on her heart and then pointed at the sky. "What's wrong?" Thomas asked. She slowly drew a circle in the air, then dark shapes around it. He recognized it immediately. It was Enceladus, and the dark shapes were the field that had taken her ship. Thomas frowned. "You think it will stop the signal?" Lena nodded. That night, Thomas thought hard. They needed a way to send the message before the field noticed. Maybe if they sent it during a solar flare, or when Saturn's magnetic field was strong, it would cover the signal's trail. He made a plan. The next day, he went to the control tower and used his access to check the timing of solar activity. A weak flare was expected in 2 days. "That's our chance," he told Lena. "It's not strong, but it might be enough." She smiled and nodded. While they waited, Lena began to draw more often. She showed Thomas pictures of her peoples. Past. There was one drawing that stood out, a tall tower reaching toward the stars, with people from many worlds standing together. Thomas pointed at it. "What's this?" She replied, slowly, "Unity." Then she showed a picture of Earth and added, "Human shapes beside her people." Thomas understood. Lena's people believed Earth could one day join with others, not through power, but through heart. Finally, the day of the solar flare came. Thomas and Lena went to the signal room just before dawn. The station was quiet. Most of the crew were still asleep. Thomas connected the crystal to the old signal booster and aimed the dish at the coordinates Lena had given him. "Are you ready?" he asked. Lena looked at him, and her eyes glowed with light. She said softly, "Ready." Thomas pressed the button. The booster made a low sound as the message uploaded. The signal traveled upward, riding the wave of the solar flare, far into the stars. They watched as the crystal dimmed slowly. Its message sent. Lena sat down quietly and closed her eyes. Thomas whispered, "Do you think they'll answer?" She opened her eyes and smiled. Yes. The next day passed slowly. Nothing happened. The second day passed. Still nothing. On the third day, while Thomas and Lena sat in the lab garden, watching the small green plants grow under soft lights, the station alarm suddenly beeped. Unknown signal detected. Thomas jumped up and ran to the control room. He opened the message file. A soft wave of sound played. It was similar to Lena's old signal, but this one was fuller, deeper, warmer. Lena entered the room and froze when she heard it. Tears shimmered in her glowing eyes. She walked to the screen and touched it gently. A new hologram appeared, one of her people. The figure spoke without words, but Thomas understood through the soft symbols floating in the air. "We received your message. We are coming. You are not alone." Lena turned to Thomas. Her voice was full of emotion. "Home heard me." Thomas felt a strange mix of joy and peace in his heart. He smiled and said, "You did it, Lena." She placed her hand on his and whispered, "We reached." The signal from Lena's people had changed everything. Thomas looked at the glowing message again and again. The words were simple, but full of meaning. "We received your message. We are coming. You are not alone." Lena stood quietly beside him. Her eyes were filled with light, and for the first time since Thomas had found her, she wasn't just smiling, she looked truly calm. The fear that once lived in her was fading. She wasn't trembling anymore, but peace didn't last for long. 2 days later, someone knocked on the lab door. It was Lena, the science officer. Her face was serious. She held a tablet in her hand and spoke in a firm voice. "Thomas, we need to talk privately." Thomas followed her into the hallway, trying to stay calm. He knew something was wrong. Lena looked at him. "We scanned the system logs. Someone used the old signal booster 3 days ago." Thomas didn't answer. Lena narrowed her eyes. "That booster hasn't been used in years. Yet it sent a powerful signal with an unknown message. Not to Earth, not to the solar system, but somewhere far." Thomas finally said, "It was me." Lena stepped back. "Why?" Thomas looked her in the eyes. "Because someone out there needed help, and we needed to answer." Lena looked confused. "Someone?" Thomas hesitated. Should he tell her about Lena? Would she understand? Before he could answer, another voice called from down the hall. "Lena, come quick. There's something strange outside." Outside the station, the sky above Enceladus had changed. A soft light flickered across the stars. A shape appeared far above, almost hidden in the clouds, a glowing ship, moving slowly, silently, shining like crystal. People inside the station gathered at the windows, pointing and whispering. Fear, curiosity, and wonder filled the air. Lena turned to Thomas. "What is that?" Thomas said, "It's her people. They came for her." Lena stared at him. "Her?" And that's when Lena stepped into the hallway. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood tall and calm, dressed in a silver robe Thomas had given her. Her skin glowed softly. Her eyes were gentle. She didn't look dangerous. She didn't look like an enemy. She looked like someone who had been through something hard and survived. The crew didn't know what to say. Some backed away. Others stared in silence. Lena walked forward. Who is she? Thomas stood beside Lena. Her name is Lena. She's not here to harm us. She crashed here. I found her near the ice weeks ago. You kept this secret? Lena asked. I had to, Thomas said. I didn't know how you'd react. Lena looked at Lena. What does she want? Lena raised her hand slowly and opened her palm. A soft image floated above it, a symbol of Earth and her world, with the light of hope between them. Lena's eyes softened. She took a deep breath. I need to report this to Earth Command. Later that evening, Thomas and Lena sat in the quiet garden room of the station. The stars above were clearer now. The glowing ship remained still above the surface, not moving, not making sound. They are waiting, Lena said softly. Thomas nodded. Are you going to leave with them? Lena looked at him and touched her heart. I want to, but I don't want to go alone. Thomas looked down. I can't leave. Earth. Lena looked sad. She reached into her robe and handed him a small piece of crystal. It glowed faintly in his hand. This is gift, she said. Thomas asked. What does it do? She smiled. Remember. That night, Earth Command sent a message to the station. Their orders were clear. Do not engage with the unknown ship. Secure the alien being for scientific study. Wait for pickup. Thomas read the message in silence. He looked at Lena. Her eyes had already guessed what was written. They want to take you away, he said quietly. They don't understand yet. Lena stood up and looked out the window. I cannot stay. But I cannot leave if I am caught. Thomas stood beside her. Then we need to get you to the ship before the pickup team comes. The next morning, before the sun rose on Enceladus, Thomas and Lena moved quietly through the halls. Most of the crew were still asleep. Thomas had planned a way out through the maintenance tunnel. It led directly to the surface, not far from the place where her ship had crashed weeks ago. As they stepped outside, cold air touched their faces. The ice field stretched in every direction. Above them, the glowing ship floated like a peaceful moon. They walked slowly, step by step, toward the light. Halfway there, alarms suddenly rang from the station behind them. Lena's voice came through the speaker. Thomas! Stop! Come back! This isn't the way. But Thomas didn't stop. He looked at Lena and said, We're almost there. She smiled and reached out her hand. Together, they moved forward. The ground below them lit up soft lights from the ship, guiding their path. A circle of warmth formed around them. Then, slowly, a beam of light reached down from the ship. Lena looked at Thomas. Her eyes filled with both joy and sadness. I must go. Thomas nodded. I know. She placed her hand on his chest. You helped me. You saved me. You believed. Then slowly she stepped into the beam. Light surrounded her, lifting her gently into the sky. Thomas watched as the ship above shimmered brighter. Then, without a sound, it rose higher and vanished among the stars. He stood alone on the ice, holding the glowing crystal she had given him. He didn't feel empty. He felt full. The days after Lena's departure were quiet at the station. The icy winds outside whispered softly, but inside, Thomas felt a calm he hadn't known before. The glowing crystal she had given him sat on his desk, pulsing gently with a soft light. Thomas touched the crystal often, feeling a connection to Lena and her people far beyond the stars. Earth Command sent a team to investigate the strange ship and the signals it had sent. Scientists, diplomats, and explorers arrived to ask questions and learn what they could. But Thomas stayed mostly in his room, holding the memory of Lena close. He remembered how she trembled the first time he saw her, not from fear of him, but from a deep sadness and loneliness. Now she was gone, but her message remained. One morning, as Thomas worked on his reports, the crystal suddenly glowed brighter. A soft hum filled the room. The crystal opened like a flower, and a small image appeared. Lena. She smiled gently. Her eyes were full of hope. The message was simple. Thank you. We will come back, together. Thomas felt a warm light in his heart. In the weeks that followed, the station changed. New voices arrived, scientists curious about Lena's people, engineers studying the technology, and dreamers imagining what it would be like to meet other worlds in peace. Thomas often walked outside, looking up at the stars. He thought about Lena's world, the floating cities, the music of the air, the light that moved like water. He wondered if one day, humans and her people would stand together beneath the same sky. One evening, as the sun set behind the icy plains, Thomas met Lena near the observation window. She smiled softly. You did something brave, Thomas. You helped her when no one else would. You changed everything. Thomas shook his head. I just listened. I just cared. Lena nodded. Sometimes that's all it takes. Far above Enceladus, in the silent stars, a new ship moved quietly through space. It carried not only Lena, but others, her people, ready to return. They came with hope. They came with kindness. They came because someone had reached out. Thomas looked at the glowing crystal one last time before placing it carefully in a secure box. He whispered, We will be ready. The future was open, full of light and possibility, and somewhere, across the endless dark, two worlds waited to meet. End of the story. She was trembling when I saw her, but I don't think she was afraid of me.